But ladies and gentlemen, we are pumped to welcome Chris Ruggiero to the show today. This guy has spent years on stage before jumping behind the camera, and that theater background completely flipped how he approaches content. Chris has been all over the map, helping brands all throughout the country turn one-off viewers into actual fans through his work at Electric Creative and his Between Dreams projects. What makes him different is that rare mix of knowing both the tech side and while never forgetting it's real humans watching on the other end. Something most of us marketers honestly struggle with. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Dealcasters, the one and the only Chris Ruggiero. How are you, man?
Where's my applause button? I got to find the applause button. Oh, there it is. I was looking on my buttons here.
Where our friend Florence is chiming in from YouTube. She says hello. So that there you go. That's our applause. So Florence is chiming in. Chris, man, I'm super stoked about this. You and I met a little bit ago because I actually hired you. So one of the best decisions I made. A lot of people, when they go to create content, especially solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, they, even ones that know how to do stuff, don't really, look and invest in someone to take that vision to the next level. And Chris, our guest here, created videos for me, for my business at Cast Ahead. And I needed what was, kind of client testimonials, right? But client testimonials can be kind of boring, right? I mean, if they just have to be done the right way. So I kind of had a vision for what I wanted, and I don't know, it was half baked. Let's be honest. And I got a referral to you, Chris, and I mean, honestly, you just knocked it out of the park, because I think I had a vision for it, and it was plussed up so much by that. And first of all, I just want to start off just saying thank you for that, and thank you for I know you're an incredibly busy person for doing that. So I wanted to set this off like that. But before we get into like the origin story and where you were beforehand, I mean, you were on stage. There's a ton of video of you on major television. James Corden, Ellen Degeneres, Martha Stewart. What did you learn from being on the stage on the other side of the camera? Because I think a lot of content creators, they've only been on this side. They're only creating stuff for themselves, right? Or stuff for other people, but they've never been on that side of the camera as a creative, as a musician, as a performer, as that. What maybe are some things that you learned along the way?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. That was a great intro. That was there was all of the things. That was amazing. Yeah, I mean, jumping right into it. So I don't know if you actually said why I was on those shows and what I was doing, but most people wouldn't guess. It's because I was doing juggling tricks, which is a very funny way to get on TV. But I think ties exactly into what you said, in that I needed to really come up with a way for people to care about juggling, because juggling is the type of thing that is like a cool, like silly trick that your dad or your uncle kind of does for you at at an event or at the family picnic or something. But what I learned in that was I need to really think about, how can I make this about the audience? And everyone says that, think about the audience. And often we think about that as the person at home sitting on the couch watching the TV or watching their phone or whatever it is.
Right.
But the thing that I think that was the key for me to kind of like unlock some of those opportunities was remembering that the audience is, on a television show, the audience certainly is the people at home. But before you get in front of those cameras, the audience is the producers of the show. Or in a lot of the audience from this show will be, the audience isn't who is going to at the end of making the content, who's going to watch it. A lot of the times the audience is the client or who you're selling to. So you need to think about too. I think that was really helpful for me to think about, like, it doesn't matter how cool of a trick I'm going to do or how tall my unicycle is that I'm going to be balanced on. And because the end audience might love that, but I needed to come up with ways to kind of like, for lack of better words, convince the producers to even give me that chance. And I could go into some great stories about how long it took and how much I had to craft those, proposals and submissions to talk to, producers of such, the Ellen Show, brewing right there, and James Corden, literally years of crafting those things that I kind of presented to them so that they would let me be on screen for, 40 seconds. And I think that, so to bridge that gap is the same thing. A lot of creators and podcasters, content creators, have these amazing ideas. Like they have their big circus trick, whatever their circus trick is, probably not juggling and unicycling, but making cool content, making whatever it is. And they feel like they haven't gotten their chance to show it to the world. And from my experience, when I've talked to people, they kind of keep just trying to do more and kind of keep hammering next to the nail is a good way of thinking about that. You're like, I keep hitting it really hard. It's like, well, it doesn't matter how hard you're swinging the hammer if you're swinging it next to the nail and not hitting it. So just adapting that so that you can create something, you have to get creative so that you can figure out how to get your chance. So I think that that's maybe a little bit different than what we initially were jumping into on the idea of this. But I think it's an interesting way to think about it for content creators, especially. Like most people are really good at things. And most people don't get those opportunities to show that off. And they're kind of swinging the bat or swinging the hammer just ever so slightly off. So that fix that 1 degree thing so that you get into the right conversations to be able to show off what you do and get the gig or impress the client or whatever it is that we're trying to do.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, we're getting into some tactical stuff, which I can nerd out with you for hours about. And I love that you went there because there's a part of me, I have no understanding of how someone pitches to be on some of these shows, right? And how to, I'm thinking, well, somebody has some sort of agent, and hey, I have a guy, and it's just like this thing that I have no idea how that would happen. But I having that understanding, like you're talking about, do you think it's changed now content creation, even 5 years ago, has completely, gone in especially the word influencer, right? Anybody with a phone can be, some sort of influencer and get on TikTok and Amazon and do all of these things. Do you think that whole mentality of that audience is changing a little bit because you are speaking to potentially millions of people anytime that you're doing something, anytime that you're doing that, or are people just not? They just, for some reason, they have a speed bump in terms of treating it differently, like you're talking about. Like, this isn't just the moment that you're on Ellen, right? This is an opportunity for you to speak to more people and get hired or do that.
Yeah, lots in there. I think things absolutely change, and they're changing faster than I would like. And I think for a lot of us, especially when we're kind of gear people, like a lot of us are, it's awesome and frustrating at the same time because like gear is awesome, but then you buy something and 6 months later, it's everything out is new. Right. But I think at the end of the day, attention is what we are trading and selling and buying often. So attention will never change. Attention will be paid by audiences. Paying attention to something is what you care about. And I think that's just our job if we're creating content, is to be rigid enough in our approach and principles of how we do it and why we do it, but adaptable enough that we don't get locked into.
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Stream Like a Boss with the amazing Tanya Smith. Whether you're a coach, consultant, or creator, Tanya's got that magic to turn your live streaming skills into a powerful lead generation engine, transforming those chirping crickets into cash-paying clients with a revolutionary boss framework. The link to check it out is here in the show notes, or you can head on over to streamlikeaboss.tv. Hey, and tell Tanya that Dealcaster sent you. Now back to the show.
One idea, and I'm talking about this right now with some people about the podcast bubble in itself. And this might offend a lot of people in our circles, but, it's like the podcast bubble, it's has to change soon. There can't be more years of more people just making podcasts that look and feel the same. Like the audience the audience has always in every media, every type of media gotten bored with it. And then creative people created something new. It started with, live entertainment, my world, like vaudeville performers. Not that it started with that, but, going back at least 100 years, people doing tricks on stage and comedy and dancing and music. And then, radio comes along and then, throughout the whole thing, whatever the order is, radio and then TV and then, vaudeville, my world of juggling kind of like went away for the most part. And then it like comes back and evolves. But no matter what, people getting on stage, whether that's in person or on a camera and a screen, and creating something that's often, I would say this as an extreme, always entertaining, often educational, and also equally often inspiring. Those are things that will never go away. Like people will always want to smile and laugh or think about something. They always will need to learn something. And human nature is most people want to watch something that's uplifting and inspiring.
Yeah.
I just try to stay away from the controversial. The controversial stuff is the surefire way to go viral, but in a way that's not useful to anyone here. So I've just stayed because I've never really had a viral hit in any way. Like the Ellen appearance maybe was like a thing, but even that, it wasn't like, oh, wow, I'm in the world. It was like a fast burning, and that was useful to me. But I kind of subscribe a little bit more to the Seth Godin kind of mindset. He says this, he's like 0 of my blog posts that he's written every day for however many years, 15 years or something. He's like, by design, 0 of my blog posts have ever gone viral. And that's not the point for him to blow up. It's this collection and the consistency of showing up every day. The one thing I wanted to lay out for people to look up if they want, the mere exposure effect, MERE, exposure effect, just simply says people often like things that they're familiar with and that they've seen a lot. And we've seen this with every big major company, like the classic question of like, if Coca-Cola makes, whatever billions of dollars a year, why do they need to advertise on billboards and on Super Bowl ads and everything else? And because they're already selling a bunch of Coca-Cola, but that's because of the mere exposure effect, because if you continuously see it, why is Red Bull, if you say energy drink, equals Red Bull, because they're the most visible, and people that don't even like I don't drink Red Bull, but I'm like, they're cool. I'm like, I have this initial thing of like, oh, Red Bull's cool. So going back to your original thing of like, is stuff evolving and changing? Yes. But the mere exposure effect, us being visible and showing up so that people like us by nature of if we show up consistently enough and we're not like being idiots or being too like controversial, just show up every day and people will begin to like you. And that was, going back to, I'll add that to the, since we started with the talking about Ellen appearance, I didn't have an agent and I didn't have a way in. But at the time on Ellen's TV show website, it was like, do you know somebody who does something cool that you would want to see on the show? And I was like, I know how to do something cool. So let me submit myself. And I did that. And I just submitted. And it was funny because at the time this was 10 years ago. At the time, there wasn't really a mechanism for adding like links to submit things. Now it seems crazy. You should post a link to like a YouTube video. Sure. But at the time, I was like uploading the video like to their site. And, it just at home. And again, it was like, it wasn't fast internet and it failed like 4 times in a row. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. But I just kept uploading until finally it worked. And then basically immediately, one of the producers called and was like, hey, I saw this video. I was like juggling on a unicycle in my backyard. And they were like, this is cool. And they were like, we'll be in touch, and the cycle continued where they basically called back the next week. They're like, can you come to LA next week? At the time I was living in Pennsylvania. They're like, can you come to LA next week? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And they're like, oh, we'll call you next week. And like with details. And then you just never hear anything back. And then they go on like break for the summer. And then like a year later, they like called. They're like, hey, we're still like, you're still on this list of people that we think that we would want to use.
Yeah, I haven't slept since then. So thanks for getting back.
Yeah. Right? I've been waiting.
I was sleeping at the airport waiting to get on the plane.
You said on Thursday you were going to call me in March. So, and that kind of happened to skip the details. That kind of happened for a couple years. And throughout all of those years, what I was doing, because then at that point I had their email, so I had it direct and I didn't have to wait on the slow internet and upload videos. By that time I had their email. So in between all of those times when they were like, hey, you're still on a list, you're still on our desk. We haven't thrown your headshot away yet.
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Social Media News Live. Jeff C. and his amazing guests will keep you up to date on what's happening in this entire changing world of social media. They talk with industry experts and innovators and creators about the latest social media news, tips, and tactics, and they broadcast live, so you can ask the questions that matter most to you and your business. Jim and I love this show, and we know that you will too. Head over to socialmedianewslive.com. Hey, tell them Dealcast sent you. Now back to the show.
What I would do is just every month or every couple months, if I had a new idea, I would send it to them of me just in the backyard with a video. Like, hey, what about this? Again, balancing on a unicycle while juggling, standing on a ball while unicycling, like fire or not fire. Because sometimes that's another good point of you think like, oh, the biggest, most impressive thing that I can do. And this happened to me a lot in my like entertainment world of like adding fire and adding like a bunch of height by being on a tall unicycle would often scare people away. They're like, we don't know if we're going to be allowed to do fire. We don't know if there's going to be like a chandelier over the stage. So again, thinking back to audience, what you're going to do might be an epic trick or in content thing like, oh, we're going to bring cinema cameras and we're going to have all this production, like things that content creators think is cool. You might be actually scaring your clients away because they're like, whoa, that sounds like a little bit much and we're actually scared away. So really going back to that, thinking about who the actual audience is. And often, it very well, there's a lot of clients in content world that might say, I feel more comfortable if you show up with like a ring light from Amazon and your iPhone and film me that way rather than like fill in like cinema cameras and stuff. Because a lot of these clients that people like us get hired to help have never been on camera before. So like at that point, they are our audience and we're serving them. And, camera people are notorious for wanting to buy and then show off all the fancy junk that they buy, spend a bunch of money on. And that's me included.
Right.
And something that, so this is going a few different tangents, but I think it's good to think about is in that audience-centric mindset, thinking about the person on camera, if we are content creators or people that are hired to help clients create content is how do we make them, they're our audience at that moment. We need to make them feel comfortable and so that they can present their best ideas in a way that is effective. So that might mean smaller cameras, like the camera's further away from them, or, there's a million little tricks that we can do. But it goes back to what I learned from, doing things like the Ellen show. And I'll add this because it stacks on top of it, is the James Corden show. Their segment was supposed to look like they just found people that could do cool tricks. And they didn't want it to look like they hired professional entertainers to come in. The point was like, this guy can do some crazy stuff.
Right.
So when I was sending, so that was the same thing. That took about a year of sending ideas to them before we landed on something that was appropriate to them. And the thing with them was it looked like I was using juggling props. So I kept being like, I've got these like cool juggling props that I spent money and they're polished and shiny. And it's this cool new trick that I, learned and developed. And they were like, yeah, that's cool, but it looks like we would have just hired a professional juggler to come and do this trick. So what I was doing in my living room, I was living in LA at that time. What I started doing was just going around the house and finding whatever I could find. I was like, okay, here's a pillow. I can like spin a pillow on my finger and, maybe I can add that or like balance on top of something and spin this pillow, or I can flip these bottles. And so that turned into my audience wasn't to the people watching at home anymore. I wasn't impressing them just yet. Who I had to impress first was the booker. And he told me, luckily, he told me exactly what he needed. And I think that's a bookmark this moment. Everyone that we work with and interact with tells us exactly what they want. Sometimes not as easily and clearly as we would want them. He did me a favor and he was like, he didn't just say like, no, that doesn't work for us. He was like, no, that doesn't work for us because it looks like you're a professional entertainer that we hired and we want it to look like we found a guy in the audience. But I think everyone, if we're aware enough to shut up long enough to listen and ask questions, our audience, and in this situation, clients that we might want to book us, they will probably tell us what they want. And again, I include myself in this. Often we are too busy trying to, sell that we've got a cool new cinema lens or a new light that we want to use because we just spent $3,000 on it. So we're like, we can set up this big light. And it's like, okay, cool. I don't want a big light. But we didn't listen to them long enough to do that. And the final part before, just to wrap that in, I'm a big fan. This might be controversial as well, but currently a big fan of Alex Hormozy content about just making stuff happen. Is like, he says, if you're selling, do the thing, whatever your sales thing is, and then shut up. Because so many people start to lose the sale. Somebody was like, yeah, cool. And then you're like, oh yeah. So, and then also we can bring this and then we'll add this in. And then you just they're like, no, we don't want all that. And now we're actually not sure what we want because we were happy with just, whatever it was. So again, I think both of those things, I wanted to add that onto the end of it was another shut up and let them talk moment. Maybe that's what this episode should have been. Shut up.
Yeah, exactly. It's sales 101. A lot of the clients, and we work together with a lot of those clients. They're sales, they're sales trainers, and that is rule number one: is shut up and listen.
Yeah,
and some of them even have this little trick where they bite their tongue, like they tell themselves they literally bite their tongue because they're like. They're going to say what they need to say, but eventually that person will tell you what they want. And it's our job to tell, in this case, the audience, for them to tell us what they want. And like when you do something on a stage, when you are performing, you will get a response, right? You hear that. It sounds like it's applause, right? And so, okay, this is what the audience wants, right? And then that goes into the the brain, and you're just sort of like, okay, this is this is how I'm moving in this direction. And if someone doesn't like it, you will either not hear applause as loud, or you may hear, other things that okay, let me put that into the brain and figure that out. Jim, I know you had a question.
Yeah. And so you've got this great background, Chris. You've, like Chris has said, you've been on both sides of the camera. And I like how you kind of hit a little bit on what's going on or potentially going on in the world of podcasting in the future. But we hear more and more, I think even Disney, so much emphasis on streaming in general, whether it's live or recorded streams. So based on your background, what do you see as the future of audience first content? And, because I think all three of us are dealing that with clients. It's like, hey, where should I either go live? Where should I put my stuff? Should I do video if I'm a podcaster? Those sort of things.
Yeah. So to clarify, I have lots of thoughts, so I want to dial it in. Is this like a typical client, like a thought leader who wants to create their own podcast type? More than like a big brand?
It's more, I think, of we'll call it the small to medium-sized creators that maybe they're just getting started, and kind of to your point, it's like, hey, I'm not Ellen, but what should I do? And, or they're so worried, like, oh, like, do I even need to go try to get on TV anymore? Right? Because things have really changed.
Yeah. The answer is no, by the way. And at the time, like I said, that LMI stuff was a handful of years ago, and it certainly moved the needle. But now at this point, create your own thing for sure, just to lay that out there. And I think shifting and this is something that I'll just kind of speak from where my current thoughts are on it, is I think people who are thinking about starting a podcast just need to shift a word in their brain to say that they aren't, even if they are starting a podcast, don't think about it as like, oh, I'm a podcaster or I'm a host of a podcast, because it has certain implications of like a couple of guys sitting around a microphone, which again is fine for a certain world. I mean, that's what we're doing right now. But I'm trying to shift that word instead of podcast to show.
Yeah.
Because show allows it to be a lot more than what people, and again, it doesn't matter what it's called. I know that. We'll just say that. It literally doesn't matter what it's called, but just in your mind, I'm the host of a show, or I'm creating a show. And that allows a lot more, because a TV show, it can be a talk show with a person sitting on a couch, or it can be a National Geographic travel adventure where, it's out in Antarctica, and it doesn't need to be a production. It could still be on your phone going and exploring. So I think that's where I'm excited about as I said at the beginning, this podcast bubble is probably, seen its peak or very close to its peak. And I think creators are going to have to get creative about not sitting around a table on a microphone, but getting out into the world. And if do you have like you don't have to like call someone by name, but do you have like a specific thought leader or a person's like industry or something even? And we could do it, maybe like come up with an idea on the fly.
Yeah, let's go with as an example, realtors, right?
Sure.
Because that industry needs to change. And I think there's a few that are trying to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, this is certainly not a new idea, but I'll just lean into it because, and I open up Instagram and TikTok and you see realtors all the time and they're like sitting on a couch talking about mortgage rates or something. And that's cool. And it's, certainly useful like knowledge because somebody told them like, oh, educate your audience about what it is. And I mean, and again, this is certainly not new, but just to like get the thinking, it doesn't need to be brand new or super clever or creative, but say a realtor or a real estate agent in Atlanta, your options are you can do, post photos of you in a fancy outfit, which is what 90% of them do. You can, the rest of the like 9% make a podcast where they're sitting on a couch talking about mortgage rates. And I think the 1% have a show. So, okay, I'm a real estate agent in Atlanta. Why aren't I going out and just making a show about how amazing Atlanta is? Hey, if you love food, it doesn't matter. If you're a real estate agent and you love food, be like, hey, every day, or like coffee, hey, I'm a real estate agent in Atlanta. I sell houses in Atlanta because I love this city. Every day I take you to a coffee shop that I absolutely love. And I hope you move here. And when you do, I'll help you buy a house. And every day you review a coffee shop. And if, boom, right there, you have everyday content and it's on your phone and it costs you $6 a day to go buy that coffee. And post that, or it's live streamed or whatever it is. Or like if you like, again, if you're realtors, that's an easy one. I appreciate you giving me that layup because realtors are such an easy one because you're just like, hey, I want people to buy a house in this town. So you just like show why this town is awesome and like just go outside and walk 3 blocks in any direction in Atlanta. You're like, oh, there's great stuff here. I love hiking. Okay, go on a hike every day. I love, fancy restaurants. Okay, go to a fancy restaurant. And this is every city like has any of that. So yeah, I think going back to the show, create a show around what you like. It doesn't, and realtors don't like mortgage rates. Like why?
Imagine, Chris, if local government took some of these ideas to show their community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the key here is, okay, first of all, like too many people are locked, like you said, Chris, in this is what I want to promote. So I'm doing a show talking about this that I'm trying to promote. And if you're thinking about your audience, you want to be likable so that they can buy your house or that they can vote for you or whatever we're talking about in this instance. There's one thing that you kind of drove by a little bit, and you said something that you like, something that you're passionate about. Because I think too many times when you're working with someone, a client, and you're onboarding them, and you're trying to, you're consulting them to create show or create a content, create podcasts, whatever. They don't like it. Like and no one wants to listen or watch someone who is doing something they don't like. And so, one of the shows that I produce is called Lancaster Connects, and it's based out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And it's 2 guys that own a mattress store. And they broadcast the show out of the store. And the whole show is on Lancaster, Pennsylvania, small businesses, nonprofits, and charities, and how they are giving back to the community. That's
exactly.
And where do you think people go to buy mattresses in central Pennsylvania? They don't have to say, here, we're having this sale and you can get this for $3.99. Don't do that. People aren't going to tune in for that. People are going to tune in for the feel good. Hey, this nonprofit works with homeless people. And here's how you can get involved in the community with this and this and this and this. It becomes a source for people. And I love that you went there. And we're doing this live consulting right here, Jim. Are you a real estate agent now or something? What's no?
No, I work with a realtor.
Yeah. I mean, we keep circling back to the mirror exposure effect. Like those guys don't need to sell mattresses. They need to show up and be a part of the community. Just like, Coca-Cola doesn't need to sell Coca-Cola. They just need to show up and make cool, pleasant content. Red Bull is another one. Red Bull isn't interesting. And I think this circles back nicely to that. If you look on Red Bull's Instagram, you won't really see any product. You won't see a cool product video of a can pouring with a 360 camera around it. Like you just won't see that. But they are, you say Red Bull or you say energy drink and people say equals Red Bull. But what you do see is, and again, I say that, but there's cans of people drinking, but they're always doing so, it's like they're drinking it because they're jumping out of an airplane while they're doing it. There's never like a product video. It's like a product attached to somebody doing something epic.
Right.
So again, that goes back to, maybe on the morning coffee, you hint in like, hey, here's a place. And at each morning coffee ends with, add the Red Bull can if you need to sell the Red Bull can. And hey, today's, this week mortgage rates went down, 1%, whatever, 1%. So, it's not just, so going back to what I said initially of like, what won't change is entertainment, education, and inspiration. So like hit them with entertainment. Oh, people that love coffee, aka everyone who lives in a city is like, no, this is awesome. They show me cool coffee places. Oh, and it was pretty cool. In the last 10 seconds, they told me like something that I needed to know about this week's mortgage rates or how to get a pre-approval or whatever that realtors talk about. And instead of starting with that, like, hey, today we're going to talk about mortgage rates this week, because like, we don't care. But hey, this week I'm going to show you my favorite coffee shop of the day. So lead with entertainment, and then show the Coca-Cola can or the Red Bull can if you need to, aka what the thing is that you're selling. But just keep showing up. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, we've got like Florence is chiming in over on YouTube. She loves it. The fancy junk that we buy, and the tip on something you like is gold, and it becomes human connection. And I think this is the thing that, again, I mean, you breezed by the gold here, Chris. We got so it's my job to take you back.
Bring me back in. Bring me back in.
Yeah. Entertainment, education. Right? Like when too many people look at creating content and they want to find what worked, right? Okay, success leaves clues. I understand that. But like, oh, Alex Hormozi did this, right? So I'm going to do this. Or, Gary Vee says that you need to do X amount of TikToks a day. And this person told me this, and this person told me this. And they're looking for these kind of frameworks to create content, and they forget that the real roots of that creates all of these things is education and entertaining. The number one rule in podcasting, folks, never be boring. Like, don't be boring. If Jim and I get boring, like, the show's over. Like, this is why we bring people like Chris on the show. We'll get right back to the show, but first, I wanted to tell you about the School of Podcasting, the number one place to learn about podcasting, brought to you by the amazing Podcast Hall of Famer, Dave Jackson. I'm a member, and it's a fantastic place for podcast courses, a super helpful podcast community, and unlimited podcast coaching. The link to check it out is here in the show notes, or you can head on over to sop.dealcasters.live and tell Dave that Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show. Because we know you're not going to get bored, and if the show is for you, you're going to get educated. You're going to stay because you're entertained, and we don't bat 1,000 on this thing, but it's so important, and not just podcasting, right, Chris? So when you go to work with somebody, and talk to me about, like, if somebody's hiring you to do, like, hey, I just want stuff for my social media and on my website, and they may have a budget of X. How do you frame out a day or two or however many days when you're working with a client? I mean, it could be anybody from let's choose somebody that's more corporate, right? Not on camera a lot. And you're going by their office, and then they're like, what can you do with this? How does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good example and a real life one to give you. So, and I will be honest and say that I've been lucky that most of the clients that I've worked with, maybe this is not lucky, and I've crafted a way to attract them, is that they are, and maybe my ideal client right now is somebody who is a kind of a thought leader already in a space, and they want to do content, and I'm not really currently trying to convince anyone to do content. And again, that's just maybe partially luck and partially that I've crafted a way
they just don't have the time. Yeah, they just don't have the time to do it. They need somebody like you.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite clients I've worked with a few times in the past year or so, Bob Goff, he's like a New York Times bestselling author and speaker. So he's not exactly the, you can hear the sirens. Move to Atlanta, everyone. There's sirens here.
It's a parade.
Yeah. There you go. You'd be a good realtor. You'd be like, yeah, it's great. You have a parade every day. You like fire trucks? Move to Midtown Atlanta. Bob Goff is a 4-time New York Times bestselling author or something. So not exactly of somebody who is like, oh, I've never made content before. But I'll give him as an example because I think it's a good example if you are somebody or working with somebody who isn't used to it, because he has a good model of how he creates content because he's a tremendously busy person and he doesn't even know. He'll even say he doesn't know past tomorrow. He has, there's Bob. And, he's an amazing person and he really just has this approach to his life it's great. So if you guys aren't familiar with him, and we make a good part of his Instagram content. He has different layers of content. Some of it's bigger production, but right now we're kind of doing it with Electric Creative, and I typically lead the that project. And the last time I was out there at he owns a resort center, and he was teaching a workshop, and people were arriving in the afternoon for the first day of the workshop. So he was like, let's film in the morning. We'll go to the vineyard at the resort area, and then we'll go to the farm because there's horses there. And then we'll come back inside and do sit down, just address the camera with topics. So the approach to that was, again, going back to what he likes hanging out at his resort center that he teaches courses at. He loves that he was able to learn how to build a vineyard and grow a vineyard. So he talked about his life lessons in that. He loves there's these special therapy horses that live there at the farm. So he wanted to talk about those. And then what he has is a notebook full of ideas. Then he just has ideas throughout whenever he jots down just a 1 or 2 sentence or 1 or 2 word idea. Then he'll remember what it that's the punchline and he'll remember what it was about. So then when we sit down, he just goes through all of his ideas and tells a little story. And these are 1-minute social media clips. So again, I think that's what it is going, if a client was like, I just don't know. Yeah, so that's the vineyard that you're seeing on screen. So that's me just holding a camera. And I don't know what he's going to say. He's just like, I got one.
And he's super passionate. You could tell. We don't have the audio for various reasons, but you can tell he loves what he's talking about. You can't make that up.
And that was just on the fly. I don't know if you can see the views there, but every post that he makes gets 50,000 plays, 100,000 plays, and he's scrolling the comments there, tons of engagement. Yeah, all of those things that you're seeing there are stuff most of them are things that I've filmed. And most of them, there's the horses that we see. So we're out at the farm now, and I think that one did really well. Because everyone, put a horse. If you don't know what to do, put a horse in your Instagram. It'll do really well.
Yeah.
Yes. So again, so to bring this all back to where we're at is he did what he enjoyed. So again, I love that resonated. Is if you love coffee, go talk about coffee all day, and then spin in what you do, whether you're a realtor or a author or a podcast host or whatever it is. Bob was super passionate that he was able to learn how to grow a vineyard. So he wanted to create content in his vineyard. He loves his farm and his horses. So he talked about his horses. And then what we picked up to fill in the gaps, because after talking about vineyards and horses, we run out of stuff. So then he went back to his notebook. And then that day, the guests were arriving at that workshop that he was teaching at 1 or 2 p.m. We filmed the vineyard, the farm, and then inside like the little living room set there. And we got, I think, 65 clips that day.
Jeez.
So if you think about, that was before his day start, that was before lunch break, because he went and ate lunch and then taught a workshop that day. It's amazing. But anyway, so like the thing, the biggest excuse I think is people are like, I don't have time to do that. But before lunch one morning, he got, assume that he's going to post every weekday for there's 20 weekdays in a month about. So before lunch one day, he got 3 months of Instagram posts for posting every single weekday.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to introduce you to the amazing Cloudlifter CL1 from Cloud Microphones. This amazing little blue box boosts your dynamic podcast mic signal for pristine audio quality in just seconds. Jim and I love ours, and you can snag one of these CL1s or new Cloudlifter X's for yourself from the links in the show notes below. Elevate your audio content with the Cloudlifter. Now, back to the show.
And then he can still talk to his phone to supplement that. So he actually can extend that even longer.
Wow.
So that's the approach that I would think about if you are, just a tactical thing. And it's the same as, everyone's like, oh, batch content, you can do it once a month. But I think that was really cool because we didn't just sit down and have to talk for, 60 clips. We went out to the vineyard, we went out to and it made it a lot easier because it didn't feel like we did that much because, okay, there's like 5 little ideas about like, oh, a storm came and what did I learn about the vineyard because of a storm? And then, oh, it took way longer than we thought it was going to. And, oh, I had to learn that the grapes get sour if it rains too, or whatever. It's like, oh, it's just all these little things. And it's like, okay, there was like 6 topics before he ever even needed to, think about what to say next. So, so again, going back to like the coffee, or if you love hiking, be like, oh, here's like hiking, and you can talk about, infinite things about hiking. What kind of socks do you wear when you go hiking? And it's like, oh, and by the way, here's what the mortgage rates are today. Boom. There's, you can do that, whatever,
Yeah. And the other thing too, in just hearing you talk, Chris, because my mind's going back to when we worked together as well. And, again, like there was this great sort of like relationship that it was the first time we had met in person, right? And, we had had a couple virtual calls, but there was this sort of great relationship where in my mind, I was kind of the director, I guess, producer, whatever you're calling it. You want to call it. And maybe you're more of like the engineer, but I basically set it out beforehand. We had this, I had this concept, right? But even when you have the best plan put together, like, oh man, this is going to be great. We talked about it. We know it's going to be this. I've got, general questions I'm going to be asking the client, right? It's going to look like this. It's going to do, things change, right? You have humans involved, something's going to change. Like the person on that side of the camera is going to say something different or ask questions. Or in the case of having you there, I gave you the sort of the freedom and the autonomy to say, hey, what about this? Hey, what about this? Hey, what about this? And I'm paying you to be there. And I'm like, I guess that works. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, heck yeah, that's going to work. I love that idea. Other times I'm like, let's try it. I don't know. And those are the ones that end up making things better, right? By investing in someone that can take you, not just make things quicker for you, right? In the case of the author here, it's of Bob, but it's adding that extra value that you can't do alone. Right? It's just, you just can't do, you could try and probably be pretty good, right? But it's like when I talk to somebody about, producing their podcast, you could do a podcast yourself. You absolutely could. And it would probably be pretty good, right? But if you really want to be able to do the things that you're passionate about, if you're not passionate about doing podcasting, and all the stuff, and I'm not talking about speaking into a microphone on a camera. I'm talking about the other stuff that has to do with podcasting that no one talks about because boring, right? So it's like we handle that because that's fun for us. and that you do this stuff because I can tell you're super passionate about it. And I love the fact that that extra secret weapon that I think you have is that ability to pull yourself out, right? And go, this is what I'm seeing. I see it this way. And leaning on your expertise and the history of everything that you've done to be able to take something that you thought was going to be great and make it even greater. I'm not sure there was a question in there. I just wanted to say that.
Just to jump onto that really quickly, the idea of, because going back to the theme of audience-centric, a lot of times you hear this idea of like, oh, make sure you're creating content like audience-centric. And I love, you kind of did a perfect thing because you did this thing of like zoom up and above. Because I've always thought about this, even in entertainment and in content, because people are like, oh, make it for the audience so the audience likes it. But then you still, if you like, okay, I'm going to sit in the audience's seat, you still have one perspective. And we don't really ever want one perspective. You just kind of flipped it to still being one-sided. So I always thought about that. No, it's bird's eye view. What I did as a juggler meant nothing. Juggling tricks meant nothing. And then also like sitting in the audience, like thinking about that also meant nothing. What the magic happened was if I could go up above and look down is the interaction. You said that earlier too. You need to be aware, like, oh, are they responding to this? Do they not care about juggling tonight and I need to just tell jokes? Maybe. Often kind of, that's really the reality. So and then creating the content too is like, we kind of like, oh, be audience centric, be this. But so it's like be bird's eye centric is maybe a better way. Look it from above. And this is a play because there's never a creator creating and there's never an audience consuming. There's an audience and a creator interacting, even if it's through a screen. So I'd encourage everyone to think about that. Don't ever think about things as one-sided or the other, or even both of them, but disconnected. It's from above. How are those things playing back together? Because when the creator and the audience play back together, that's interacting equals building a community. People in a community do things. They don't, a community doesn't mean they're sitting somewhere alone. It means they're with people interacting. And at the end of the day, that's something that I'm kind of like toying with my own like language and kind of like mission of like the whole point of all this is to build a community. And whatever that kind of means, it means different things now in our world, but it all comes back to like build a following, build an audience, become an influencer. You're influencing other people in your community. So whatever words those are attached to, if you kind of think about it, they all flow back to building and building and being part of a community.
God, it's so true. And I think that's why we love to do live videos so much. And number one, you get organic, action. Like, we had a conversation for 5 minutes before we went live, folks. Jim and I have a framework that we want to keep in the lane. And we went into different directions, Chris, than I ever thought. And it was better. We're better for it. You don't sort of overplan it. And Florence is here from Equip Institute. She's chiming in, right? She's part of the Dealcasters community and the Ecamm fam and all of that. And so it's important, I think, especially when you're just starting out, because you feel like you're alone, right? You feel like and even if you're having a conversation with somebody on the screen, then you're taking your content and you're tossing it over the fence, and then you wait for the likes and the dopamine and all of the things. And none of that's really is real. And the best way to do it is that bird's eye view that you're talking about is to think about this from how can I create something that people want to show up for with me, as opposed to not people showing up to watch and listen. Like, who's going to join me in this with yeah, I mean, you're right. I think so much of it is language, right? Not just the podcast word, turning the show and the definition of that, but like just so many things we can't get stuck in that rut, and we have to create a place where not only you're educating and entertaining people, but a place people feel comfortable to join you and share in terms of community. Jim, I know you had a question. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a question, but also a comment. And knowing that you and Chris work together, one of the things I really feel like you did, and maybe this is something you really focus on with your clients, is that you seemed, and this isn't easy, so this is meant as a big compliment. You pulled Chris Stone out of his comfort zone, and that is really helping his potential audience know what he's really about, that you maybe wouldn't have got otherwise if you had just kind of let him do his thing and like not give him that input.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of, working with other people, because people are like, oh, we'll get new perspectives. It's like, well, that also leads to exactly that. Yeah, pulling people out of their comfort zone. And I felt that even, with Electric Creative, Mary Beth is the other person that works at Electric Creative with me, leading that project. And I kind of initially had a lot of pushback because most of my life I've done stuff myself and had my way of doing things. And that's been something for me too. I was always like, oh no, simplicity and like not as much design elements. And that's one of the things. And just that I've had to like stretch what my comfort zone is and open things up. And then she oftentimes, I'm like, no, like that's not right. And then like see the work that she does or like that she helps with. And I was like, oh, well, that's good. I would have never thought of that. Literally this week launching a client project, and she helped work on she didn't help work. She did the website. And I was like, wow, that was a really good idea. I would have never, that would have never come into my world. And I would have done it a way that was simpler and worse. Not that complexity is the answer, but yeah. So that, allowing yourself to admit that you don't know how to do everything the best, even if your entire life you've done everything yourself and you think that you're the best at it, is key.
Love it.
Yeah, and the only way we're going to get better, right, is to challenge ourselves. I mean, you don't, if I don't go to the gym, then I start to get fluffy. I gotta, you gotta go and challenge yourself. You gotta challenge your mind. You gotta do things, and a big part of that is pulling in other people to help you through that, and that is why, ladies and gentlemen, you hire Chris Ruggiero, and you could go to chrisruggiero.com, and that's where we got this lovely thumbnail. This image here is pretty strong, dude, with the arrow on the shoulder. Pretty amazing.
Mary Beth took that photo, so there's another shout out to Mary Beth.
Yeah, that's a good looking man right there. So chrisruggiero.com/1-1 if you want to pick the brain of the man that we have on our screen. And of course, we didn't even get into this, and we're at time. And maybe I do want to highlight this because I think it's a fantastic project that you've got. But Between Dreams is another thing that you do. We can't touch on all 78,000 things that you do, but I would love to touch on Between Dreams, because I know that's a huge passion of yours, and it's just a fantastic thing. So I'll roll it to you. Please tell me about it. Yeah.
I can loop that in real quick because I think it ties back into the idea of create a show. So Between Dreams is my kind of passion project where it's my playground to develop and explore ideas. And so there's a podcast that has 125 episodes, I think now. And another version of that is working with musicians. So Between Dreams Sessions, which is, there's 165, I believe, of those on the YouTube channel. And it's a place where I can explore these ideas of kind of like this create a show. And I've invested a lot of time and money into developing this kind of whole world. And it's kind of I like to kind of say it's my like walking the walk and not just talking the talk of like, if I believe in creating content and I'm trying to get people to give me money to do so, I should probably be doing it myself.
Yes.
And figuring out a way. So right now there's some big ideas brewing of attaching. So like I have a lot of like IP, original content, especially in the music side, that could be, so to tie this again back together to like, okay, what could this is more like a bigger brand, but say, Marriott or a generic hotel brand, to keep the IP people happy. We could go to every city and create these like live music experiences on the top of a mountain or a scenic place in that place. And then it's like, brought to you by insert hotel name, see the world with Hilton or whatever it is. So yeah, that's where I'm like,
on that.
In an ideal world, this will be, I think we can land it on this without going too far over, but if like marketers and content creators like us believe in content and making stuff, there comes a point, and this will also make some of the marketers upset. There comes a point, if we say we're so good at this, why don't we just launch a product of our own and start selling it? It's what Liquid Death did. Liquid Death, that guy used to work for VaynerMedia. He was like, I'm really good at marketing. I bet I can do this for myself and launch a product. He did, and it became the biggest beverage brand to ever exist. Like, that's not Coca-Cola or Pepsi. And so I think that's where, if there's one thing I can leave with the actual content creators that are listening, is like even if it's just a hobby and but have your own thing. Because that'll let you learn. Because the reason why I can be good when I work with Bob, who has 700,000 Instagram followers, or Taylor, my friend Taylor, who I work with, who now has 200,000 Instagram followers.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about the game changer for your audio setup. Of course, it's the one and only Shure SM7B microphone. This iconic beauty is a go-to for top-notch podcasts. You've seen it on stream. It's the perfect microphone for any environment. You don't need a fancy studio. It's got built-in protection that handles background noise like a pro. Jim and I love ours, and you can level up your audio game today. Just check out the show notes for the links. Now back to the show.
And I can pick up those little, or working with you, and coming up with these ideas where I'm like, oh, I can be fast on decisions because there's 165 singer-songwriter performances that I've recorded. And every one of those, there's a challenge that happens. Some of them are recorded outside. I was just in LA last week recording on top of a mountain in Los Angeles. There's a helicopter that crosses everywhere in Los Angeles about every 45 seconds. So yeah, I think that to tie that all up, Between Dreams is my playground. There's nothing that I'm selling. If you can go look it up, Between Dreams or Between Dream Sessions or whatever. But I think the point that I'd like to make about Between Dreams is, if you are a creator of any sort, have this thing that's like yours. And it's even better, I would say, if you're in a position where you can make it where it's not selling anything. I think Between Dreams is respected by a lot of folks because we don't make any money. It costs me a sizable amount of money to keep it afloat. And there's never been anything that we sell. So it's terrible advice if you need some money right now.
Right.
But like really good advice if you, like 10 years from now, you want to like say you did something. And I will say, like, terrible, like in the granular, but like it's the reason why certain people just call, because it's like the best business card ever. Like, I don't really do direct sale. I don't do direct marketing. Things just often, not, this will sound arrogant, but a lot of times things just land in my lap. And I can directly credit that because, there's hundreds and hundreds of pieces of content that I've made. So it's like they kind of speak for themselves. So goes back to the mere exposure effect to land the plane. Whatever it is you do, just keep showing up and be the person that people like. And people will like you just because they're familiar and they've seen you show up a bunch. So you can sell houses or paint or podcast production, whatever it is. Just because you keep showing up like you guys are doing here. It's amazing.
Awesome.
Chris, you're awesome. I have so much more to say. We could do another show just on that. As someone who works for other people, and we share that, having your own sandbox to play in is massive. And Between Dream Sessions, go to that on YouTube. Go to all the places, chrisruggiero.com/1-1, electriccreative.studio. That's say that 3 times fast. and check out Chris Ruggiero, our man here in the ATL. Chris, this has been awesome. Thank you for making our show better today. And for everyone else, as always, don't fear the gear.
Thanks for listening to Dealcasters. Congratulations, you've taken another step forward in your content creation journey. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button here in your favorite podcast player so you can be reminded every time we drop an episode.
We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. And if you're wanting to watch our shows live on Amazon, feel free to follow Dealcasters Live as well at dealcasters.live. Follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we also included added content that you cannot find anywhere else.
If you have questions about this episode or have something you want us to review, you can also email us at dealcasters@dealcasters.live. Thanks again for listening, and you know the deal. Don't fear the gear.